Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and today we've got another sort of a bonus episode for you. This is part of a two-part episode I did several years ago on my main podcast talking about Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal. This is going to be part of a future series on the podcast. I eventually want to cover all the Muppet films and Muppet-related media out there, and I will be counting anything made by Jim Henson himself as part of this series, whether it's Disney or not. So, in the spirit of completion, I wanted to make sure to include this two-part podcast I did a few years ago on the original 1982 Dark Crystal film and the 2019 prequel series, The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. Hey everyone, welcome back to I Heart Movies. My name is Jonathan North, and today I'm joined by my friend Steven Mannasse, and we're going to be talking about Jim Henson's epic puppet fantasy, The Dark Crystal. If you're a fan of this movie, you're probably already aware that last year Netflix released a prequel series covering the time leading up to the events of this movie. Steve and I covered everything in our discussion, but since we talked for such a long time, I'm going to make this into a two-parter. So this time we'll be covering the original 1982 film, and next time we'll be talking about the 2019 series. Okay, that's all I've got for now. Let's get on with this episode of I Heart Movies with Steven Mannasse. So, when did you first watch the movie?
Well, that's actually kind of funny because I am a Jim Henson fanatic. I mean, clearly I'm representing the right colors here, but I actually didn't watch The Dark Crystal until I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
And that was pretty much because of the fact that I really didn't have anybody around me that merely spoke about that specific film. And quite frankly, I heard a lot more people that were close to me talking more about Labyrinth than they did The Dark Crystal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't watch The Dark Crystal until right before the series came out, but it's one of those movies that I had always meant to watch.
Yeah,
Like, my cousin loved Labyrinth, so she watched that one. She got me to watch that one, and she had been talking about The Dark Crystal. She liked it and thought we should watch it, but we never got around to watching it.
mhm,
And I even bought like a little DVD set that had both of those movies on it, but I still hadn't actually watched it
yeah,
until the series was coming out, and I was like, I need to actually watch this thing so that I'm prepared for the series.
yeah. It's kind of funny. I actually ended up owning that Jim Henson Fantasy Trilogy box.
Is it the one that has, I think, Mirror Mask in it?
Yes,
That's
yes,
the
because
set I had.
yeah, because it was actually Mirror Mask that got me more intrigued than the other two films because Neil Gaiman was attached to that, and also just knowing that it was the Jim Henson Company that decided to do something outside of the Muppet movies that they were doing for Disney at the time. I was saying to myself, well, I saw the trailer and it looks so different than anything else I've ever seen in the world of fantasy. And since I wanted to see Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal at some point in time anyway, I just said, you know what, why don't I just buy all three? And I
Hmm.
watched all three.
Yeah, the Mirror Mask movie is the only one that I haven't watched yet. I'm still planning on watching that one, but it's the one that I haven't gotten to yet.
I highly recommend it. Mirror Mask is so interesting. It's so unique in terms of a fantasy film that is family oriented to a degree, but it's just so creative and the visual effects are like nothing
Hmm.
that you'd see in any other film right now. It's crazy.
That sounds pretty much right up my alley.
I personally think that you would enjoy it. I think so.
Yeah.
And if you're a Neil Gaiman fan, it's just an added bonus.
I've seen a few things that he's done, but I need to watch more. I like there's been so many things of his that have been recommended to me that I haven't gotten to yet that I need to.
Was Good Omens one of them?
That one hasn't been specifically recommended to me, but I've seen the trailer and it looks like I would be into that series. I need to watch
Yeah.
it.
My wife and I watched it after we both read the book, and I personally think the series is better than the book. But then again, when
Okay.
you have Michael Sheen and David Tennant working together as a duo in this film, it's
Hmm.
just perfect. They are magic together.
Yeah. I mean, I really like David Tennant because I'm a big Doctor Who fan. So that's what initially got me interested in it. But
Right.
the premise seems interesting.
It
It looks
is.
like it'd be good, so
It
I
is.
need to watch
It's
it.
and if you like British humor, it's
Yes.
also perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah. I grew up watching British comedy on PBS. So why don't we get into like the actual movie, talk about the story
For
somewhat.
sure.
So the movie, it doesn't really give you a whole lot of. I mean, it gives you an introduction, but it doesn't tell you a whole lot to help things make a lot of sense.
Hmm.
So you're kind of just thrown into this world, and it's one of those things where you just have to accept the things that are happening without trying to figure out like why these things are happening, trying to make sense of the whole thing. You just got to go with it.
I agree. I mean, it comes off as a very simple story,
Hmm.
especially in the beginning, because they obviously tell you, that there were two entities that became two races of people, and one's evil, one's good, and clearly the side of good doesn't really, at this point in time, know really what its mission is. But at some point in time, the two Gelflings that are part of the main focus of the story learn about their destinies. And by the time you get to the end of that movie, it's sort of like a whole Empire Strikes Back kind of vibe. Like once you find out that extremely turning point in the plot, well, now I want to know what happened before this. Like, how did this
Hmm.
all come to be? So the fact that they make it start simple and it ends up being a complex lore and world, that's what's called genius storytelling. You
Hmm.
know, giving the audience and the watchers the ability to crave for more when they didn't know they were going to expect it.
Yeah, Jim Henson, he was basically a genius. I haven't seen anything he's made that I haven't liked.
Yeah, at this point in time, my wife and I are actually every weekend we watch a few episodes of Fraggle Rock. So we're definitely very much big Jim Henson fans. And yeah, I agree. There is just something about this man's mind, and there has not seemed to be anybody that has duplicated this kind of storytelling and
Hmm.
talent. I mean, the closest that I could get to someone with a similar mindset to Jim Henson, for at least in my mind, is Guillermo del Toro.
Okay.
But he's definitely not someone that does much family storytelling as much as he
Yeah.
does adult storytelling. But you could see his family oriented storytelling if you watch some of the Tales of Arcadia cartoons on Netflix, like Troll Hunters and Three Below.
Hmm. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but that's probably a pretty good comparison.
Hmm.
I feel like even the continuations of Jim Henson stuff, very few of them really seem to exactly capture his brand of storytelling. Like they come close. Like I like the new Muppet movies that they've
Hmm.
made, and I really liked Age of Resistance.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
even just watching The Dark Crystal before I watched Age of Resistance and then after, I feel like it's as close as they came, as good as the series was, it felt slightly different than Jim Henson's vision. Just slightly,
Yeah.
not in a bad way. It just his had this atmosphere. Like last night I was going to watch the movie last night when we didn't get around to it, but I told somebody at work that I was going to watch this and they said that it gave them nightmares when they were a kid. And I hear that a lot, that the Dark Crystal gave them nightmares. And I don't know if the new series would be as prone to giving children nightmares as the movie. Maybe it would, but there's something about the movie, about the way his puppets moved and behaved, that just felt slightly different than what they're doing now, which it's not a bad thing. I really liked what the new series. I love the new series. I think I like the new series better than, at least from a storytelling point of view, I liked the new series, what they did more than the Dark Crystal, the original. But it just felt slightly different, and I don't really know why. Maybe it's because it was made in the 80s.
I think the answer is, if I could try and pinpoint it, it's because of the fact that Jim Henson believes in the famous term actions speak louder than words. And I think the
Mm,
reason why kids got so scared is because if you are a young child and you're watching something that really is made for kids, but if you're not really getting the opportunity to get an understanding of it through the spoken word,
Yeah.
You're just going to be left with so much mystery, and like a small child's going to be watching all of these interesting and creepy to a certain extent, especially when you go to the Skeksis. You see all these weird images, and they're not saying anything. They're just humming, and they're floating around, and they're
Mm-hmm.
running around, and they're growling, and it's like a young kid is not going to understand that.
Yeah.
Whereas when you also take a look at the television show compared to the film, yes, I would agree. The show is definitely better than the movie from the perspective when you take a look at them side by side. But that's also because of the fact that when it comes to a television show, you have more time to expand the world, expand the characters,
Mm-hmm.
give the story a little bit more time to flesh itself out. There's very little that you can do in a 90-minute block.
Yeah.
And the thing about the television show is it's really, I've been saying this a lot very recently, it's Game of Thrones for the whole family. The whole thing with the politics and the different tribes,
Mm-hmm.
it feels very Game of Thrones to me. I don't think that that is what Jim Henson was going for. Jim Henson just is someone who goes for pure, unadulterated fantasy. And even when in his films there is a lot more dialogue in it, he still manages to get that ultra fantasy factor in it. Because, like, when you compare The Dark Crystal to Labyrinth, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot more spoken word. But if you're a young child and you start seeing these pieces of rock starting to talk, or when you see like the helping hands, like those are just interesting images. He still knows how to kick up the fantasy even when there's a lot more explanation given, but it's all
Mm-hmm.
about the light and the motions and the eye contact. That's one of the few things that Jim Henson knows how to do well. With the show, it's just a lot about politics and story, and it's not bad, but that's where I think the difference really lies between the two.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, because that was one thing that I made note of when I was watching the movie this time, was how much quieter it was and how little dialogue there was. Because I wanted to specifically pay attention to each Skeksis and see how the voice actors compared, because with the new series they got big name voice actors for the Skeksis.
Mhm.
And I wanted to see, like, did the big name voice actors match the Skeksis perfectly? But there weren't that many opportunities to test that out, because the Skeksis really didn't say a whole lot. Like,
Yeah,
Chamberlain did, but that's about it. The others
and that
had a
and
few lines.
that's the part that impressed me the most. Like, I never would have guessed in a million years that on The Age of Resistance that was Simon Pegg voicing the Chamberlain, and
Mm-hmm.
he did such an amazing job to replicate the original Chamberlain voice. Because if I'm not mistaken, when you take a look at the classic Jim Henson movies, whether they were these or the Muppet movies, there's that core crew of Muppeteers within these stories, like David Goles and Frank Oz and Richard Hunt, like all those genius people alongside Jim Henson. They were most likely the ones that were doing a lot of the work for the Dark Crystal.
Well, do we want to get into, like, plot stuff from the first movie?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so at the beginning we're introduced to the Skeksis and the Mystics, and we're not really told a whole lot about them, but we know that one of each is dying.
Yes.
And when I first watched the movie, I didn't really think anything of that. It was just one of those things, it just kind of felt like a coincidence. I didn't think that there was anything to the two dying at the same time. But then you later find out that that's actually an important plot point, that they're dying at the same time. And
Exactly.
I don't think this is in the movie, but I read that the mystic that was the counterpart to the emperor of the Skeksis, he was like willing himself to die to throw the Skeksis into chaos, because without their leader, well, then you saw what happened, like with Chamberlain and the other guy fighting.
Hmm.
Their fight was ridiculous.
Yeah,
After the
absolutely.
emperor dies, they're like battling by hitting a rock with swords, and also screaming and posing at each other. Like it felt like animals, like birds, like just
Yeah.
squaring off against each other. I, it was ridiculous, but I liked how it felt like animals.
Well, that's pretty much what's so interesting about that whole idea. I mean, they expanded upon that whole concept on the show as well. The fact that these were actually one of the same. And it's
Mm,
so funny because that's not necessarily something that's new. That's something that has been done in so much fantasy. But yeah, what's so interesting is plunging when you're trying to plunge something into chaos, that's not necessarily something that's good. Not at all. And it's funny that we're talking about that specifically because right now I'm reading a lot of Green Lantern comic books leading into the story of Blackest Night. And I just finished the Sinestro Corps War. Once Sinestro was defeated and arrested by the Green Lanterns, the Yellow Lantern or the Sinestro Corps War is now officially plunged into chaos. And it's dangerous because basically every single one of them wants to be the leader now. And they're each doing something to scare the others and doing something even more extreme than the others. So yeah, not necessarily a good thing to do sometimes.
hmm Well, it seems to have worked out in the Mystic's favor. Like if he
Yeah,
was doing it on purpose, his idea worked.
yeah,
But the Mystic has been raising Jen, who is supposedly the last Gelfling,
yeah,
and he's telling him this prophecy that he needs to find this shard. And we're not told a whole lot about this prophecy.
yeah.
I don't think we even know who made the prophecy. I don't think that was even said in the series, was it?
I don't think it was in this. You know what? I'd have to rewatch the series, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was Agra.
That makes sense. She seems like the kind of person who would be making a prediction like that.
Agra turned out to be, I think, my favorite character in regards to the whole story of the Dark
Uh-huh.
Crystal. I really love that character because there's so many layers to her.
Mm-hmm.
It's also really crazy. It's also very interesting because what makes her character so interesting is that she's supposed to be this omnipotent overseer, yet it's so incredible how easily she can be corrupted.
Yeah, that is true. And she doesn't seem to know stuff that you think she should know, but then she knows this other stuff. Like Jen is sent to find her by the Mystic as he's dying. And when he does find her, she seems surprised that he's even alive.
Yeah.
But then later on, towards the end of the movie, she's never met Kira,
Hmm.
but she knows that Kira can talk to animals. It's like you didn't know that they existed, but now that you know that she can talk to animals. I'm not sure exactly how her
Well,
omnipotence works.
well, that's what's but again, but you see, that's Jim Henson. That's what Jim Henson does all the time. You know, he makes these characters he makes great characters because some of those that say that they're perfect are not entirely perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and where they lack in one area, they're so much stronger in another. That's what
Mm-hmm.
makes his characters so great. And there's also in the world of fantasy, it's like because one of the few things I remember about Agra is I believe she reads minds. I think she has some telepathy powers within her. So if she's in the presence of somebody in that direct moment, she can find those things out.
Okay,
That's the way that I look at it.
that's probably true. I think she can dream fast with the Gelflings,
Yes.
because that probably ties into that as well.
Yeah, that's still one thing about the lore of Dark Crystal that I'm still trying to get a full grasp of understanding about the whole dream fast. It's just interesting to me. Like I'm still not entirely understanding it. I mean, I am hoping that Age of Resistance gets a season 2 because I'd like to
Yes.
see a little bit more of that expanded on. But you know, I'm also still waiting. If I may be so bold, I'm still waiting for season 1 to come out on Blu-ray because I would like to buy it.
Yeah. Netflix doesn't do that many of their series on home release,
Well, if
but
the
it would be
yeah,
nice to own that one.
well, that's one of the other things, you know, with this whole streaming wars thing that's happening now. If you really want people to subscribe to your channel, thingies or whatever they are, your streaming services, you should give more people the opportunity to watch your programs by other means so they would subscribe. That's a smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd be a smart thing to do just from a business sense as well, because not only do more people have the opportunity to watch your stuff, but people who can already watch your stuff on Netflix, if they like something enough, they're going to buy it anyway. Like, I would
Exactly.
probably buy Age of Resistance on Blu-ray just because I would
Yeah.
like to own it.
Yeah.
So you're going to get people basically paying you twice.
Yeah. But the only difference is if someone if someone actually buys the physical media and doesn't subscribe to anything, then you just throw down your $20 to $30 and that's it. You know, you're
Yeah.
not renting it anymore through Netflix. I mean, that's the main reason why I have a feeling that The Mandalorian will probably go on DVD or Blu-ray at some point in time, because I don't have Disney Plus. I have no intentions to get Disney Plus. I didn't get the DC Universe streaming service, and yet Young Justice Season 3 came out on DVD, and I bought it, and I watched it, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, you're the kind of person that they need to be making these releases for. The people who don't want to subscribe, but they still want to watch the show and they're willing to pay for it.
absolutely. I mean, it's a win-win.
So in the movie, after Jen gets to Agra, he finds the crystal, and there's the whole thing with him playing the flute that seems kind of out there, but it's one of those things where you just have to go with.
Absolutely.
They're attacked by these things called the Gartham, and we don't know much about them until the end of the prequel series, but they're
Yeah.
basically these giant crab people, crab spiders,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like the army of the Skeksis. They've been sent by the Skeksis to stop Jen because they saw Jen in the crystal, because the crystal is like an ancient big brother apparently.
Yeah.
It can show them anything. So they already know that there's still a Gelfling out there. And Jen escapes from these things and he finds Kira, who is another Gelfling.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of makes me wonder, are they really the only two left? Because it seems like a huge coincidence that the very last two Gelfling in existence would find each other. And maybe they are. Maybe that's just how they wanted this story to be, like, it's really magical. The last two found each other. But I would like to think that maybe there's more out there just in hiding so that they can find more Gelfling in the future.
Well, absolutely. I mean, especially through the series. I mean, well, that's another thing. I mean, the question really is how much time had actually passed between these two
Yes.
story points? That's number one. Number two, there are 7 tribes of
Yes.
Gelfling.
Yes.
So, like, how can 7 tribes, especially one that lives entirely underground, be gone?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
That's why I think the show is going to give us a lot more answers to where we actually get to this point. If it ends up getting extended with a couple more seasons, that's what I'm hoping that we can see. I'm hoping that we'll see how we got from well, in this case, you know, because the movie came first, from point B to point A and then back to point B.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I'm really hoping that we get more details on that. And I'm kind of wondering, maybe I'll ask your opinion. What would you think about them remaking the movie as part of the TV series? Do you think that's a good idea?
Only if Guillermo del Toro directs. Anything that was high fantasy in the 1980s, whether it's the Never-Ending Story or the Return to Oz, if Guillermo del Toro or Robert Rodriguez are not directing those movies, it's not going to work for me. Or
Okay.
heck, if they really wanted to go crazy, they could get Denis Villeneuve to do it. That would be even more interesting. I mean, that's why I have such high hopes for Dune when it comes out later this year. Because I don't like the book. I don't like the 84 film. But Denis Villeneuve knows how to work it. So I'm like, give me, as long as you've got a good director, especially a director who just loves this stuff, like we said earlier, I think that if they did want to remake it, sure, go for it. As long as you're going to make it entirely pure and true to the original, just with a more up-to-date feel to it.
Yeah, I feel like it would almost make sense to have their own version of the story, because after watching the series, watching the movie again, it just struck me how quickly everything happens. Like, the
Yeah.
series really takes its time. You spend days, if not weeks, with these characters, getting to know them, learning all the politics of their lands, learning about their species, learning about their backstories, their history. And then with this movie, you don't really get much of any of that. You just get the basic story. He gets sent out on this mission by the mystic who's dying. He finds this shard, he finds Kira. They make their way back to the castle, and as soon as he plugs the piece of the crystal back into the crystal, everything's over. Like, there's a few other things that happen in there, but it's really straightforward and really quick and simple, instead of taking its time. And I feel like if it almost makes sense to me that they would want to do the story again, but take a little more time with it to get to know Jen and Kira, because you don't really get to know them much beyond getting a little bit of backstory when they do their first dream fast, when you find out that he was raised by the Mystic, she was raised by the Podlings, and you get a little bit of backstory there, but that's kind of about it.
Yeah, and again, I think that that's where I feel that the TV show, if it continues, is going to give us those answers. Because, like you said, how did Kira become someone who was raised by the Podlings? Well, right now in the TV show, there's a massive friendship between Hupp and Deke. So that could have been the start of something. We still don't know too much about the connection of the Gelflings to the Mystics as of yet, but clearly the story, we've only scratched the surface at this point in time. So I feel that, once this show, depending if it comes back and if there are more seasons, I feel that once it comes to an end, then everything will just be more understood and everything will be it will be like that last shard being plugged into the dark crystal, turning it into the crystal of truth once again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just, I really hope that they get another season.
Yeah, me too. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten renewed yet. I thought it was going to get renewed right after it aired because so many people were raving about it.
Mm-hmm. Plus, it's been getting nominated for a bunch of different awards. I don't remember which award exactly it was, but I saw it nominated, I think, for Best Animated Series. I'm not sure where that happened, but I was like, I really like that it was nominated as an animated series, because I've said for years that puppetry is almost a form of animation.
I agree.
It just makes sense, and I really like that it was getting some recognition like that.
I agree. I very much agree.
In the middle of the movie, when Jen and Kira are making their way to the castle, I really liked that there would be these long scenes where not a whole lot was happening, but you just got to see the puppetry on display. Like
Yeah.
in the alien forest, where you have all these little creatures, and even things that are not really creatures, like the rocks and plants, they're creatures in their own way, just moving and doing things. And I just thought that was, I mean, it doesn't add to the story, but I really like that Jim Henson added that in, just to give you a feel of the world, because it really helps make the world feel so much more real when you see all these things happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, he did that ever since he started making those Muppet movies. I mean, when they had Kermit the Frog singing Rainbow Connection in the swamp, the fact that you got to see the vast swamp and you actually got to see this puppet sitting on a real log in a real swamp playing a real
Mm-hmm.
banjo,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's what he does. He likes to, like I said, it's the connection within humans to the physical. Like, we love the tangible. And the fact that he gave us those opportunities to make it feel like this, like you see these puppets that are mythical creatures, but they're in a setting that is as real as it can possibly be. And
Mm-hmm.
it just blows your mind.
Yeah. It also, in a similar way, the dinner scene with the Skeksis.
That's one of the creepiest scenes in the whole movie, and that's one of those scenes that could scare little children.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but I feel like it's similar to that scene in the woods because it's a scene that it doesn't add anything to the story. It's just the Henson puppeteers putting their craft on display.
Exactly.
They're just doing their puppets for puppetry's sake.
Exactly.
And making it as weird and creepy as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out how Kermit the Frog and the rest of the Muppets know how to ride bicycles. I still don't know how they did that. I really don't.
I think I've seen a picture of them having this massive contraption that goes over the top, and it's almost like it's part marionette.
Wow.
I'm not sure exactly how they did everything, but I think that's at least part of the illusion is something over the top with strings coming down.
Well, I think what's even more interesting is we didn't even touch upon this, but I will still talk about this movie. In the Happy Time Murders, they've brought Muppeteering to a whole new level because now they put people in green suits and doing the puppeteering work. So when they're actually filming the movie through the digital technology, they take the puppeteers out.
They were doing that for Age of Resistance too.
Yeah, so it looks like there's no strings attached now. And I think that's what makes it even better.
Yeah, it really worked. Like through the whole series, we're not to the series yet, but like lore was created pretty much exclusively through doing the green suits with the puppeteers like right there. And It just made him feel so real that until I watched the behind the scenes stuff, I could not figure out how they were puppeteering lore. Like I thought for a while he was just really good CGI. But no, he's a full puppet as well. They were just painting out the actors or the puppeteers.
And again, I think that's what is going to keep this kind of animation, if we will, discuss it. I think that's what's going to take it to the next level. The fact that they're actually using this kind of technology with green suits and green screen, I think that makes it even more interesting rather than just doing pure CGI.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could probably skip to the end and talk about like the final climactic battle, I guess, if you want to call it, and the reveal.
It was like just in the palace and the reuniting of the shard.
Yeah. So when all that happened, the first time you watched it, did you know what was going to happen? Did you know that they were two halves of a whole that were going to be reunited?
No, I did not.
So what was your reaction when that happened?
I think it was more of a what the hell just happened kind of thing. Like, what did I miss, But again, that's the interesting thing about the Dark Crystal film. Like, it's simple, but when you get to the end, it just got so complex. And again, that's the part that turned this story into what it became now, like because of the fact that it started off so simple with very little told and so many questions. This happens and then you're like, okay, how do we get here? I want to know more.
Yeah I knew what was going to happen because I had heard the plot of the movie before I watched it, but watching it by myself, it still felt like this is just, I don't want to say insane, but it's like almost insane. Like you have no idea what's going to happen, and then all of a sudden these creatures who've been characters for the whole movie are gone, replaced with these weird giant glowing tree aliens. It's just so bizarre.
Yeah,
but I really like that.
Yeah, because the only thing is like, how do you get from a tree alien to those two kinds of creatures?
Yeah.
It's just so weird to me.
Yeah, I want to say it doesn't make sense, but like it's fantasy, so it's one of those things where
exactly
just go with it.
Yeah, just go. It's Jim Henson. Go with it. We all go with it so much more often when it comes to Jim Henson.
Yeah.
Because like he's the creative genius. He knows exactly what he's doing. Like he can make a trash heap a wisdom giver if he wants to, and nobody's gonna care. Like that's him.
Yeah. It just I I love his imagination.
I
Nobody has an
know, I
imagination
know.
like him.
Yeah.
And then basically the end, it's just as bizarre as what had just happened. Kira had been killed earlier,
Yeah.
and the tree alien makes some little hand symbol thing, and she comes back to life. And then they immediately all turn into these light beams, form
Hmm.
into a ball, and shoot off into space. And that's
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah, they found peace. They found peace, and now the Gelfling can rebuild.
Yeah. It's
The
just,
Gelfling can rebuild, and Aughra can just be her own loopy self without a care in the world now.
yeah. Yeah, I really liked Agra.
She's great.
I had forgotten about Agra in the movie. Like she seems almost the first time I watched it, she seemed almost like a weird, forgettable side character. And now that I've watched the series, watching the movie again, I love seeing her. I think they matched her in the series perfectly to the movie. She just
Absolutely.
she's she is a weird little side character, but she's not forgettable anymore to me. I
No,
just love her.
and did they get the same voice actor to play her in the
No, but they
show?
matched her perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then I haven't recalled the last time I think they got a voice actor to voice someone so accurately was when they got Corey Burton to voice Captain Hook in Return to Neverland after so many years of the original Peter Pan. Like that's just crazy.
Yeah, because I wondered, but I don't remember who did the voice, but it wasn't the same person. But somehow they managed to match it perfectly, and I feel like only her and Chamberlain were perfectly matched.
Yeah,
The others were close. Ritual Master, who I get, he's credited as High Priest slash Ritual Master in this. He was Keegan Michael Key in the series.
right.
So I was specifically paying attention to him, and he was close, but not exactly perfect. But like I said, they all had so few lines that it almost didn't matter.
Yeah.
The
And I mean,
Gormand wasn't as close as I thought he could be, but he was close enough. But again, he only had like maybe two lines, so it
right,
really didn't matter. And
right.
then what's the ornamentalist, the really frilly one?
Yeah,
Um, she was she didn't sound anything like I did because I think she was puppeteered and voiced by a guy in the original, and then they have a female voice actress do her voice,
right.
or maybe it's his voice. I don't know what the Skeksis genders are, but
Yeah,
it sounded completely different. That was the only one that sounded completely different to me.
right,
But
right.
for the most part, they have so few lines that it doesn't matter.
Exactly. You'd never, it wouldn't be anything that really bothered you at all. Exactly.
No, because like I said, I watched the movie, then I watched the series, and it I couldn't tell any difference. It wasn't until I was specifically watching with the intention of seeing how close the voices were that I
Yeah.
actually noticed.
Exactly. And the other thing is, there's so many new characters in the new show that it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. You know?
Yeah, and the ones that I was paying attention to are kind of side characters anyway.
Right.
Like most people probably don't even know the names, like the ornamentalist and the ritual master. I don't think they're even said. I just know that because I've been reading about it.
Right. I mean, I just remember the Emperor and the Scientist and the Chamberlain.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all we've got today in our discussion of the Dark Crystal. However, like I usually try to do with new guests, I took some time to do a quick Q&A with Steve to help us get to know him better. I did this at the end of our full discussion, but since we talked longer about the series than we did the movie, I figured I'd include the Q&A in part 1, so that's what we're doing now. For the first one, it's sort of all-encompassing. Maybe just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you work, pets, hobbies, stuff
Okay.
like that.
All right. Well, my name is obviously Steve. I am from the channel on YouTube, The Lawn Gnome. I'm actually now in my 10th year as a content creator. Actually, it's sort of a somber thing as well because after this year, I am going to be doing a massive overhaul on my channel. So a lot of the stuff that I've been doing for a while, and if you come to see my channel now, what you're going to see now, you're not going to see it next year because I'm going through some massive changes and trying to make things a little more simpler for myself, just because a lot of things are happening outside of YouTube for the better, are just going through some changes as well. But I am someone who just loves everything popular culture, and that is what my channel is all about. Movies, music, television shows, books. I am a massive Funko Pop enthusiast, although my collection is smaller than most of the big collectors in YouTube now. I also, over the last summer, just started collecting and reading comic books again, and that has been probably one of the best decisions of my life, because my place of business is very different from what I am on YouTube. I am a data analyst for a private college, and I work in Manhattan, the Big Apple itself, so it's definitely a hustle and bustle there. Right now, my wife and I live a little bit further north, and it's just the two of us in a house that we've been living in for just a little under 2 years now, and that's pretty much where I stand.
Okay. So, how did you get into YouTube?
Well, I discovered YouTube around the time when it first came out. It was 2007. I discovered it in 2008, and I found it because I thought it was a better place for me to watch movie trailers. That's basically why I started watching it. The cat videos didn't suck me in, I will say that. But it wasn't until 2010 when I actually started to pay a little bit more attention to independent content and just average content creators. And I found this guy, this kid, he must have been maybe 13 years old. His channel doesn't exist anymore and hasn't existed for many, many years, but it was called Film Fanatic 57. And I saw this kid just talking brilliantly about all different kinds of recent films. And I was actually someone who's, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a hobby, but it was fun to do. I always like to get my opinions out there in regards to popular culture. I love to write reviews of products and videos and stuff that I bought on Amazon.com. So I was like sort of a critic in my own way. But when I saw this kid talking about movies like Toy Story 3 in such a great manner, I was like, wow, maybe I should try this. So in January of 2011, I turned on my my smartphone's camera at the time. For the holidays, I actually ended up getting a flip cam, which I still use for my videos to this very day. I am one that likes to keep it simple, but just be charismatic when you're making your videos, and that makes all the difference. And that was how my channel was born. I just said, I want to give it a try, and I want to see what people think about it. And that's me in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. That's the way a lot of people do it. Just got to have fun with it.
Exactly. Never stop having fun with it, that's for certain.
So most of the rest of my questions are all about different things that are your favorite. So what is your favorite movie?
My favorite movie of all time is Back to the Future. And I am very excited because this year I am finally going to be watching all 3 of the films and reviewing them. And I decided to wait till this year because it happens to be the 30th anniversary of Back to the Future 3. So I thought that it was only appropriate that I wait for a milestone year to actually do so. But that also makes it the 35th anniversary of the original Back to the Future, which is kind of crazy. So I'm just really excited to finally watch my favorite movie again. I actually had never watched it on this TV that I own, so I'm excited to watch it on this 55-inch screen TV for the first time. And I just love those movies so much. The first one is beautiful. Marty McFly, to me, is the greatest film character of all time. And, yeah, he's also the reason why I collect Funko Pops. When they made Marty McFly and Doc Brown, those are the first 2 I ever bought, and that's how I got hooked. It just took that one character.
Yeah. That's probably how a lot of people get into Funko Pops. You see one that's like, nobody else is making toys of this. I want that. And then you end up getting 10 more.
Well, Brian Mariotti, the current CEO, basically said that by 2025, there will be a Funko Pop in every household across the globe. And I have a feeling that that's going to actually happen.
I could see it happening for most, but I could see, like, I can't see many, like, little old ladies collecting Funko Pops. But
Well, considering the fact that just last week at London Toy Fair, they announced a Murder, She Wrote pop. It might actually happen.
that's great. Oh, maybe they will then. Who knows?
Well, the Golden Girls pop line sold like hotcakes.
That they've been really popular lately, even like with the young crowd. I'm not sure exactly why, but
Everybody
that's
loves Betty White. That's
yeah,
why. It's
that's
Betty
true.
White.
Yeah. Okay. Favorite TV show?
Ooh, it sort of fluctuates, but I think the best way to do it is to split it up between animation and live action. I think that's the best way to do it. So my favorite animated show of all time is Batman the Animated Series. There is nothing else like what Bruce Timm did for the comic book industry and for television animation. It's brilliant. The fact that they really gave us epic stories, yet simple stories all at the same time, using actual actors and not just voice actors. A close second place is Animaniacs. That's just a brilliant show. But my favorite live action show of all time is Seinfeld. As a New Yorker, that show just resonates with me. And I just rewatched the whole series last year, and it was like watching it for the first time. And even a whole bunch of things that I didn't even notice, I found watching it again. But I love Seinfeld so much. I do.
Jumping back to Batman the Animated Series, that show is the reason that I'm into superheroes. Like, if I hadn't watched that growing up, I don't think I would care nearly as much as I do. And it's also the reason that even though Marvel somehow is able to make, in my opinion, way better movies than DC, the live action movies, I still feel like I'm a DC fan more than a Marvel fan, just because of Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series, which I grew up with, and then later on watched Justice League Unlimited, and all of the other tie-in things. Just, they're so good. They're so good.
I mean, yeah, I think that the Marvel movies are so much fun. But, as I said, just recently starting to read comic books again, I read one of the greatest X-Men stories, which is Extinction Agenda. It came out in the early 1990s. It's a great story. But right now, I am reading a ton of Green Lantern comics that are leading into the Jeff Johns story from 2008, Blackest Night. The story is just so much richer. There's so much more that just keeps me on the edge of my seat. And I still have a whole bunch of other Marvel stories that I'm planning on reading once I finish this Green Lantern story. Like, I'm excited to read some of the other classic X-Men stories, like Fall of the Mutants and Inferno. I'm going to also read Civil War and Avengers Disassembled, House of M, all these great stories. But right now, this guy, Jeff Johns, he's just a god in regards to writing, and he's just done so many amazing things for DC Comics. But I'm even more excited because 2020, I think, is going to be a monster year because there's a DC Marvel crossover coming. They've already started. Yeah, I just picked up last week. They just created the 6th volume of Thor #2. They are hinting at something called the Blackest Winter. And in the second panel of a Marvel comic, there is a red-blue blur, an emerald-green streak of light, and a lightning bolt running to this dark force. So basically, the Justice League is in a Marvel comic book last week. So something big is coming, and Jeff Johns is writing it, and this other extremely hot writer in Marvel who is basically the equivalent. I believe his name is Donny Cates. It's just like, if these two are basically putting this story together, I'm excited. Very excited.
Part of me wants that to happen for a movie, and part of me doesn't, just because I'd be afraid they'd mess something like that up.
Well, if you're going to get it done right, you've got to get these writers on board. Like, these writers have to be a major piece of it.
Yeah. It's all about the writing. The writing makes or breaks stuff like that.
Yeah, because I love those. I love the DC Universe animated films. I mean, I think it's kind of funny with how many there are now. At some point in time, they're actually going to be more of those than Disney canon classics. It's kind of scary. But I love those movies. They're great. And I'm so excited for this year because there are some excellent stories. They're giving us an animated version of Superman Red Sun. If you've never heard of that, it's basically a story. What if Superman's pod crash landed in Soviet Russia and not Kansas? So that's
Mhm.
interesting. And then there's going to be a Justice League Dark movie where the magic DC heroes go and face off against the New Gods in Apocalypse, so that's even more interesting. And there's going to be another Superman. I'm just really excited. It's great stuff.
Yeah. I haven't watched as many of those as I would like. I really need to catch up. I know that some of them I've been told are rather hit and miss, but I want to start back at the beginning and rewatch all the ones I've seen and then just keep going with all the ones I've missed.
Be willing to reach out to me because I own them all. I can help you. And
Yeah.
also, I do a live show every couple of months with my friend Brian, where we actually talk about these movies.
Yeah. One of these days I'm gonna get back into those. I really want to catch up because I
Yeah,
know
they're
they're
great.
making some good stuff.
They really are. They made some really good ones over the last couple of years. That's for sure. The last 2 years have been really, really, really good.
Okay, we in all that discussion we covered a bunch of my other questions, so
Oh, great.
we can move on to like I have a few that are like favorite characters, but I think I'm going to add in a few specifically for you because of what we've talked about.
Okay.
So, what is your favorite superhero?
Oh, do I have to choose? Oh, well, you know what? In DC, I love Batman, but I love Green Lantern too. And it's so funny because up until recently, I never picked up a Green Lantern comic in my life. I just love the concept of the Green Lantern. But I watched the Green Lantern CGI animated series. You know, I loved Jon Stewart on Justice League. And now that I'm reading all these Green Lantern comics, I think that Green Lantern's my favorite DC now. I really do.
Okay.
But my favorite Marvel superhero is Iceman.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a big X-Men fan, and I just always loved Bobby Drake. You know, he was the young one, the misfit, the one that tries to impress people, and also the color ice blue is my favorite color. So I just love the fact that that's, Iceman. He's just a great character. And the X-Men as a whole are great too. You know, Wolverine, Gambit, Storm, Rogue, Cyclops, they're all great.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's definitely Iceman is my favorite Marvel superhero.
Okay. And then since we've been talking so much about Muppets, who's your favorite Muppet?
My favorite Muppet, oh, this is so cliche. It's Kermit. I love Kermit. Always have. Maybe it's just because of his soothing voice. I don't know what it is. But Kermit was everywhere for me. He was in the Muppet movies. He was on the Muppet Show. He was on Sesame Street.
Hmm.
He was always my personal favorite.
I've always said that Gonzo is my favorite, but I think it's really more of a tie between Kermit and Gonzo for totally different reasons.
Yeah, Gonzo's my sister's favorite. She adores Gonzo.
I just like how insane he is. Just there's no other character like him.
He's a free thinker. That's exactly what he is. He's a true free thinker.
Yeah, I really like him.
Hmm.
And we've talked about you liking Disney movies. So, what is your favorite Disney movie?
My favorite Disney canon classic is Fantasia.
Okay, mine too.
Because there's no well, besides Fantasia 2000, there's no movie in the library quite like it. I
Yeah.
love the fact that it's about music driving a story,
Hmm.
and I just really appreciated the fact that it was one of the first films that Walt Disney ever made, and the fact that he was willing to be as bold as he was after two great stories in Snow White and Pinocchio. And I also have a very soft spot for Fantasia 2000. It may not
Hmm.
be as grand as the original, but I love the fact that they were able to try and use the new animation and the new CGI technology to give us something really, really great. And quite frankly, my favorite film may be Fantasia, but my favorite Fantasia segment is Rhapsody in Blue from Fantasia 2000. It's beautiful.
That makes sense, you being from New York and all.
Well, I'm also a big fan of Al Hirschfeld, the artist
Hmm.
that the animation was based around. I always loved looking at the illustrations in the newspaper because the best part of it, it was sort of like a Where's Waldo kind of thing. He writes the name of his daughter in every single one of his sketches, so I always had fun trying to find it.
I don't think I knew that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I loved my favorite of his sketches is the one that he did of Patrick Stewart. It's just beautiful. I'm a big Patrick Stewart fan.
Hmm. And everybody likes talking about favorite Disney princess or prince, but do you have a favorite character? It doesn't have to be the princess. Just any favorite Disney character.
Mm. If I were to choose between the heroes and villains, it's probably no. I know who it is. It's Hades. I love Hades. Radigan is a close second. The fact that they just announced the Great Now's Detective Funko Pops, I'm finally getting my hands on a Radigan, and I am so excited. But I love Hades because I love James Woods, and I also like that he is just not your typical villain. He seems more
Hmm.
like a used car salesman than a Disney villain. And Hercules, I think, is a very underrated Disney classic
Hmm.
because it really is more comedy driven than, the typical Disney formula driven kind of story. But I just love Hades. He's just such a fun villain.
Yeah, that's definitely true. He's very different than pretty much all the other villains.
Yeah.
There's just something about him. He's hilarious, and I love
It's
that.
James Woods. It's James Woods. That's what it is. James Woods is who sells it.
Yeah, the quality of his voice is just perfect.
Yeah, because I know that we recently touched upon the DC animated movies. Did you ever see the one that was called Crisis on Two Earths?
I saw one where they met alternate universe versions of themselves. Is that the one?
James Woods voices Owlman, and he terrifies me.
Okay, yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen that one, but I do
Yeah,
remember Elm.
rewatch that one.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite roles that James Woods ever did. He is terrifying.
Well, I think that's about all my questions.
Okay, great.
So I guess to finish up the show, I probably can put this on the end of both episodes, but why don't you let people know where they can find you, social media handles, where they can look you up if they want more from you?
Okay, well, the best place to find me is definitely on YouTube. You can find me at The Lawn Gnome. That's not one connecting word, it's three separate words, The Lawn Gnome. And you'll notice that you found me if you see a Simpsonized version of a guy. That's me. And you can find me on Twitter at the YT Lawn Gnome, the YouTube Lawn Gnome. That's basically all my social media. I'm sort of someone who likes to be having a minimal digital footprint. I don't have Instagram or any of those other crazy things. It's basically just YouTube and Twitter, guys. But if you are a new content creator, if you are a content creator that has been struggling with some new ideas, besides creating content myself, I took it upon myself during my fourth year to try and really help people, let them know that there is a friendly voice out there who is willing to listen, willing to learn, willing to give you insight, willing to be a sounding board or a professional or constructive criticism. When I go through my dramatic change next year, I do want to make sure that the torch is passed on to a bunch of creators that are just as passionate as I am, because I've loved doing this for the last 10 years. It has been an amazing ride, and I'm excited for the next step in my journey here. But I will still be someone who wants to see new creators and older creators like myself alike, just continuing to do the good stuff that we do here. I want YouTube to still be dominated by the individuals, by the creators, and not by the corporations. That's what YouTube was, and that's what YouTube should always be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I will have links to all your stuff in the description, so make sure to check him out if you're looking for more.
Yeah, and I want to, and I just want to thank you. This was such a great time. I really appreciate it. I know that it took a little bit of time for us to get this off the ground, but patience is a virtue, my friend, and I think it paid off at the end.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for joining me. I guess we'll see you next time.
My pleasure. Have a great one.
Yeah, you too. Bye. Thanks again to Steve for joining me today. I'll have his info in the description below. Like I said in the beginning, in the next episode we're going to be talking about the prequel series to The Dark Crystal, the Netflix series Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on I Heart Movies.